One weekend afternoon, 12-year-old Fifi was sitting in the living room, her eyes glued to her phone. Her grandfather James walked in, looking at his granddaughter with a loving gaze.
"What are you doing, my dear?"
he asked. Fifi looked up, her big eyes meeting his.
"I'm watching TikTok, Grandpa. There are so many interesting videos about the lives of famous people."
Grandpa James smiled and sat down next to her.
"Oh, really? Have you ever wondered what your own life will look like when you grow up?"
Fifi thought for a moment and then replied,
"I don't know, Grandpa. There are so many things I want to do, but I'm not sure where to start."
Grandpa James nodded understandingly.
"I understand that feeling. When I was young, I felt the same way. But you know what? Life is like a book. Each day is a new page. And we are the authors of our own story."
Fifi looked at him curiously.
"Can you tell me about your life story, Grandpa?"
Grandpa James laughed heartily.
"Of course, my dear, but it's a long story. Are you ready to listen?"
Fifi eagerly nodded, putting her phone aside and scooting closer to him. Grandpa James began his tale.
"It all started when I was an 18-year-old boy who had just graduated from high school. I chose engineering because everyone said it was a career with a bright future. But after 1 year of studying, I realized I wasn't truly passionate about it."
"So what did you do?"
Fifi asked, her eyes wide with curiosity.
"I decided to stop and think carefully about what I really wanted."
Grandpa James replied.
"That's when I learned my first lesson about planning for life. Understanding the value of time is the most important foundation."
He explained.
"You know, life is shorter than we think. On average, a person lives about 30,000 days. It sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. If you're 30 years old, you've already used up 11,000 days. Those days will never come back."
Fifi pondered for a moment.
"I've never thought about it like that before."
"Exactly."
Grandpa James nodded.
"Many people often say, 'I'll do it tomorrow,' or 'someday I'll get to it.' But someday is a dangerous trap. It makes us think we have all the time in the world when we don't."
He continued his story.
"So I decided to switch to studying journalism, a field I was truly passionate about. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew I couldn't waste time on something I didn't love."
Fifi nodded thoughtfully.
"So that's how you learn to prioritize your time?"
"That's right."
Grandpa James smiled warmly.
"That's lesson number 2, managing priorities. Many people confuse being busy with being productive. They fill their days with tasks that seem important but aren't truly necessary."
He shared how he used to overwork himself during his early years as a journalist to prove his worth.
"I often stayed late at the office, missing family dinners and important events. I thought I was doing the right thing for my career. But then one day, my boss called me into his office and said, 'James, you're a talented journalist, but you're burning yourself out. Remember this. One day when you look back on your life, you won't regret not spending more hours at the office. You'll regret not spending enough time with your loved ones.
Fifi listened intently, her eyes wide open.
So what did you do?
I learned a powerful tool called the deathbed test.
Grandpa James explained.
Imagine yourself at 90 years old looking back on your life. Will you care more about working extra hours or spending time with family? The answer will help you identify your true priorities.
He went on to describe how he changed his work habits, focusing on quality over quantity, and spent more time with his family.
And you know what? My career didn't suffer at all. In fact, I became an even better journalist because my life was more balanced.
Fifi nodded in agreement as she began to understand.
So relationships are really important too, right, Grandpa?
Absolutely, my dear.
Grandpa James smiled warmly again.
That's lesson number 3. The importance of relationships. Think of relationships like bank accounts. Every small interaction is either a deposit or a withdrawal.
He shared how he had worked to build and maintain relationships throughout his career.
A genuine compliment, a quick check-in message. Those are valuable deposits. Don't just focus on grand gestures like expensive birthday gifts or lavish parties. Pay attention to the small, everyday things.
Fifi curiously asked.
Can you give me an example, Grandpa?
Grandpa James nodded.
Once, I had a colleague named Jenny who had just joined our newsroom. She was shy and reserved. Instead of just saying hello in passing, I took the time to listen to her, ask about her family, and learn about her interests. I found out that Jenny loved daisies. On her birthday, instead of buying an expensive gift, I gave her a small bouquet of daisies with a handwritten card. You know what? Jenny was deeply touched and said it was the most meaningful gift she had ever received.
Fifi smiled brightly.
I see now. It's the little things that make a big difference.
Exactly.
Grandpa James agreed with a nod.
And this doesn't just apply to friends and colleagues. It's even more important for family. I always made it a priority to spend quality time with your dad and uncle. Even if it was just a short phone call each day to check in.
He continued his story, recounting the ups and downs of his journalism career.
You know, when it comes to your career, don't just chase money. Focus on learning and gaining experience. Especially when you're young.
Fifi tilted her head in curiosity.
But isn't money important too, Grandpa?
Grandpa James chuckled softly.
Money is important, but it's not everything. When I first started my career, I turned down a higher-paying position at a big newspaper to stay and work under an excellent editor at my current job. Many people thought I was crazy, but that decision allowed me to learn so much and laid a strong foundation for my future.
He explained further.
Every new skill you learn is like a lottery ticket for future opportunities. Think of your career as a diverse jungle rather than a straight ladder. You can move in many directions to grow.
Fifi nodded thoughtfully.
So you never stopped learning throughout your career?
That's right.
Grandpa James smiled.
That's lesson number 5. The importance of continuous learning and self-improvement. One of the best ways to learn something quickly is by teaching it to others.
He shared how he volunteered to teach journalism to university students.
At first, I thought I was helping them. But in reality, I learned so much from explaining basic concepts to others. It forced me to understand my profession on a much deeper level.
Fifi listened intently, her eyes lighting up with curiosity.
Grandpa, how did you manage to do all of that while still taking care of your health?
Grandpa James nodded knowingly, his expression turning serious.
That's an excellent question, Fifi, and it brings us to lesson number 6, the importance of health and energy management.
He recounted a challenging period in his career when he faced immense work pressure and often neglected his health.
I used to skip meals, stay up late working, and rarely exercised. I thought I was sacrificing for my career. But one day, I collapsed right there in the office.
Fifi gasped in shock.
That's terrible.
It was.
Grandpa James admitted with a solemn nod.
But it taught me an invaluable lesson about the importance of health. After that incident, I completely changed my lifestyle.
He explained how he began prioritizing his health by exercising regularly, eating nutritious meals, and getting enough sleep.
I started with small changes, like walking 15 minutes every day and replacing fast food with home-cooked meals. Over time, these small habits made a big difference.
Fifi asked curiously.
Did that affect your work in any way?
Grandpa James smiled warmly again.
Actually, my work became even better. I had more energy, better focus, and greater creativity. I learned that managing your energy is far more important than managing your time.
He continued sharing how he applied these lessons in his daily life. From building relationships to advancing his career and continuously learning. As the story came to an end, Fifi sat quietly for a moment before asking.
So what do you think is the most important thing for living a happy and meaningful life?
Grandpa James looked at her lovingly and said,
The most important thing, my dear Fifi, is realizing that life isn't about finding more hours. It's about making the hours you have meaningful. Start small, pick one idea that resonates with you and try it out. And remember this: the best time to start living fully isn't someday. It's today.
Fifi nodded eagerly as her eyes sparkled with newfound understanding. She hugged him tightly and said,
Thank you for sharing all this with me, Grandpa. I'll do my best to apply these lessons in my life.
When Fifi returned to her phone this time, she looked at it with fresh eyes. Instead of scrolling aimlessly through short videos, she began searching for meaningful content to learn from, a small but significant first step toward living her life fully.